Obe-san, so nice
Hi,
to have you back on Dr. M's vodcast, and good morning to you, Obe-san, in Washington, and is good evening in Mumbai.
Hi, Dr. M. Nice to talk with you again.
So great. And then I had to do my standard work. You Toyota people have taught me that I can't start anything without doing standard work. So let me start doing standard. Let me introduce you. And thanks for being my guest as always. And I hope this time I get the first slide right. Pray for me, pray for me, pray for me. Hey, I got it right. Okay, Obe-san, you are on the 40th episode. And I started, as I told you, somewhere around September, October, November last year. So I'll be completing 1 year. And that image that you see, you're going to talk a lot about it. Okay, I don't know what the image is about, but you're going to talk about it. Okay, so Obe-san, you're absolutely passionately involved with Toyota production system and over to 20 years and all sort of industries, automobiles, energy sector, food, and all across the countries except India. And India, you can come whenever you want. Dr. M is always available to receive you at the airport. And we are very good hosts. Okay, so please come down to India anytime. And then on the 30th episode, that is 10 episodes before, you introduced us to the concept of points, lines, areas, and body. And then you say the body was mechanism, system, and structure. And that is when you introduce the structures thinking of EPS and with special context of respect for people. And we're continuing the same theme, and which you again talked on the 37th episode when you talked about the Japanese culture and the Toyota production system. You talked to us about the west side of Japan, where you had the community-centric, etc., and the east side, which was more samurai, and then you say the place where you were born, where Toyota was born, Nagoya, right?
Yeah, Nagoya, yes.
Nagoya is in between both of them. And so they have adopted the best of both the cultures. So we're going to talk more about it. And you're going to talk about Nemawashi. I wouldn't know what it is. The best I know is preparation. That's what I know. But you're going to tell us something very interesting. Is Nemawashi a waste? Is Nemawashi a Buddha? That's what you're going to talk to us, whether it is a waste or it is value adding. I'm going to hand it over to you. And you're on Dr. M's podcast. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's hear you talking whether Nemawashi is a waste or it is value added. Over to you, Obe-san.
So let me connect to my screen. And sorry. I'm having a technical issue. Okay. So yes, today on this episode, I will talk about this question: is Nemawashi a waste? I will explain why I came up with this question, but let me briefly introduce what we discussed on the previous episode, because I think it touches about our Japanese culture, and then briefly describe what is Nemawashi, and then my personal experiences, and then talk about why I think it's a waste, and talk about how can we apply the structure thinking, the points, line, area, and body, so that this waste is not a waste anymore. On the previous episode, I made, like you already showed, I talked about the Japanese culture being, one is like the horizontal relationship, and the other is like a vertical relationship. And by understanding the structure, I mentioned that it's easier to understand and it's easier to apply to different environment, and just picking up something is important. One of the things that I wanted to reflect from my previous recording session is, like, I'm not trying to say Japanese culture is better or worse than any other culture. I don't want to compare any, I'm not evaluating cultures, bad or good. I'm just saying every culture has some positive aspects and negative aspects. And by understanding the structure behind these cultures, I think it's easier to understand and apply, implement, and do continuous improvement. So Toyota used those traditionally both Mura and Ye culture. There's a lot of discussion in Japan, and in majority of the discussion, we take this Mura mentality or the Ye mentality as sort of a negative aspect of our culture. Like, like we have a saying called Nagata-cho, that means Nagata village. That means it's where all the bureaucratic government center is there, and they have their logic of doing governance. It has a nuance to that word. Is negative, but I am trying to say that TPS used that, change the structure in a positive way. And that's why, yeah, you already introduced my thinking on the points line and body. And that's why I'm saying is like the job shop mentality is a very, very village driven mentality. I am only going to optimize my process or my job shop, and I'm going to do a batch production in my job shop because that's optimize my village. Toyota TPS guys start saying, no, let's create a continuous flow. Let's connect these villages. Let's create a one large island. And we all as a, not as a villagers, we all as a flow of this process, we live on the same boat. And think about the total efficiency, not the partial efficiency. And that's the change that they made. But what's funny about this approach was that as they start to create this continuous flow, they start connecting to the supply base, and then the network of these Toyota suppliers, they have a name like Kyohokai. It's a corporation among the Toyota suppliers, and they start to create this sort of a new, larger villages, which all these Toyota suppliers come together, they do the Kaizen workshop together, they learn from Toyota, they learn from each other, to get the better total efficiency. In some cases, like for example, when there was an earthquake, one of the supplier lost the factory. And when that happened, the factory got a lot of help from the competitors within the villages. And so they start saying, okay, you're missing, for example, the machine itself was damaged. Then the other competitors might say, okay, we can rent you a machine, or we can produce the components for you so that the Toyota won't shut down. And so that these villages, they're supposed to be competitors, but somehow the villages started to help each other during the crisis to go through the hard times. And that helped them build a better supply chain system. So this culture is always going back and forth between each other. And there's not such a thing as a good thing or a bad thing. They use this mentality continuously. And I think it's kind of important to understand this relationships. They didn't try to destroy it. They used in a positive way. So now I want to move on to this topic about Nemawashi, because I think it came out from our conversations, and I know that a lot of people is jumping onto this new, or I don't know, old, it's actually a very old Japanese word. And there's a lot of posting or discussion about this word. So let me try to explain this word and try to understand the structure behind this word and why I think it was a waste. This word Nemawashi, it's written in Japanese like this, and the symbols mean, the first symbol in the yellow means the root of the tree, and mawashi means around the tree. So roots around the tree. What am I talking about is that when we try to transplant a tree from one location to another location, we start cutting the roots of the tree like half a year or a year before the actual transplantation, because the newer roots has more capability to adjust to a new environment. So they want to have a young roots growing from the root. At the same time, if I cut everything at once, the tree gonna die. So they cut partial roots one at a time and giving some time period for the mix of the root to become healthy and younger. so that when the transport plantation happens, the root will successfully grow in a new environment. It also means that the soil on the transplant side has to be also prepared. It needs to welcome the new tree to come, and we dig the hole and we add a lot of different kinds of soils to make sure that the new tree can survive in the environment. So this kind of activity happened when we were transplanting trees, and that became the business route of sort of getting an arrangement and conducting a behind-the-scene negotiations and arrangement behind different parties, so that officially on the official setting, we don't have any argument, right? So when the village, and this is very village mentality of Japan, when we get together in a huge group and everybody coming together, we don't like to do arguments. We don't like to do debates. We pretend like, everybody is in full agreement and we are in this peaceful relationship. But the reality is, it's not the case. And there's always the winner and the loser in the community. So before that happens, we do a lot of nemawashi to say, hey, look, we have to make this change. It might have a negative on your place, but please understand. And this is the secret benefit that I can give it to you. So we do underground negotiations behind the scene. And that's why this word nemawashi has somewhat negative nuances. And that's why I also wanted to share this, my personal experience of Nemawashi. I worked in a Japanese company in not Toyota, but some different companies. And as a first time of my job, I was an accountant in the headquarters office. And I found out that one of the business has a lot of finished goods inventory. And I wanted to reduce that. So I started doing Nemawashi. I talked to the sales manager. I talked to the plant manager. I talked to the logistic manager. I talked to a lot of different parties who might be influenced by this change of reducing the finished goods inventory. And I got agreement. I got agreement with every one of them. They thought that we keeping 3 months of finished goods inventory did not make sense for this business. So they agreed to start reducing the inventory. About 1 month when I started this initiative, I got the call from my boss's boss, which is very rare. And he told me that I need to stop this. And I said, why? He told me that the head of the sales department is not happy with the decision. So we need to stop this decision. And I'm like very confused. I don't understand what he's talking about. And the bottom line, he said quietly is Yuden Nemawashi, the head of the sales guy. And he was the guy that started the business. And he was the guy that made the decision to have 3 months of finished goods inventory for whatever reason, long time ago. I didn't know about it. And I did not Nemawashi him. So he was not happy about it because I kind of, violated the pride of this sales manager. So after that happened, I talked to the sales guy. We had a discussion. I thought you agree, and I thought you would take care of the sales team. And he's like, "Oh, I forgot. I forgot to include the boss's boss, and I forgot to do the Nemawashi with him. I'm sorry." He said, "Oh, by the way, this guy that's saying no to my project, he understands the need to reduce the inventory. So now he is taking the initiative to do the inventory reduction. So they're not gonna use Hideoba as a guy that triggered this. The sales manager is starting the initiative. Can you help?" And I'm like, who cares? Oh my God, I really didn't like that seniority and the pride and everything. And that kind of thing is happening, is like a lot of Nemawashi is happening because I have to respect the seniority. I have to respect the pride of a lot of bosses, and that's somewhat a dark side of this Nemawashi. And that's one of the examples. I'm just saying, I'm not saying every one of them is like that. And this kind of negative image a lot of people has. And this connects to this discussion. Recently, I think, I don't know, about a year or 2 years ago, Toyota started this Toyota way, applying TPS, Toyota Production System, to not just to production or operations, but they're now expanding that to entire business, and they call it the Toyota way. Through this activity, some of the people start using the 7 types of waste in their office. Those 7s are meetings. Yeah, we have not too many meetings, and just people just sitting around doesn't have value. Too many paperworks, too many documents. In some cases, we making documents just in case if the boss asks us a question, it's not really value-adding work. So many adjustments and accommodations. Right of the boss. Great. You heard my example, right? And this is a typical traditional Japanese setting. The guy on the top is usually the most senior person. If you don't locate the senior person in the right location, he'll be upset. Oh, guys, I'm not saying everybody's keeping that kind of civic tradition. And the left side of the guy is the second important person in Japan. So, relatively older guy is sitting on the left of this guy. And there's like a hierarchy in the positions. If you don't respect that, they get angry. And it's just a waste of time. Mannerism, yeah, we're repeating the same thing again and again and again, and nobody asks the question, why are we doing this? Typical example might be this inventory itself, right? We're just keeping 3 months of inventory because we choose to do that. I don't know when that boss decided to do, and nobody asked the question. Pretend play, yeah? A lot of pretend play happens on this, like, to be honest, the Nemawashi that I did might be a pretend play. I pretended like I'm doing a Kaizen by trying to reduce inventory, but I did not get any result. And that's just a kid's game. The 7th one is the interesting one because they are calling Nemawashi as the waste. So one of the 7 types of waste in the office in Toyota is Nemawashi. And I think it's very important to know this, that Toyota, at least Toyota said that. And I think a lot of people in Japan is saying Nemawashi is the waste. And I think it's very important to understand why Toyota is calling a Nemawashi a waste in the office. My understanding is that this Nemawashi is a waste because there's no customer is going to pay you. Oh, we did more Nemawashi to, serve you, make the product for you. We did a lot of Nemawashi. So can I raise the price? And they will say, I don't care how many Nemawashi you did. The value of the product is value of the product. And it's not going to change just because you had more Nemawashi. It just means that your process is probably not well defined, or process itself is broken. That's why you need to have a lot of Nemawashi. And thinking about reflecting on my failure of my Nemawashi, it becomes clear that, who am I supposed to communicate? I thought I communicated most important people, but I did not capture the critical person. When to communicate is also important. In many cases, by the time when we communicate, it's too late. And that's why they don't want to take action. It's like they don't have time to make necessary changes. And what to communicate is very unclear. And that confuses a lot of the people. So when I think about this, the reason behind Nemawashi, why do I think it's a waste is because of these reasons. But then they goes one more step to say, if we have the process of this kind of decision making in the standardized way, we don't have to do Nemawashi. It's just a continuous process of decision making of different parties in the company. We shouldn't be guessing who should be included, who shouldn't be included. It should be standardized based on the roles and responsibilities of individual positions to say, okay, what is the roadmap to get to a full agreement among different parties in the company? And that's why they have this huge, I don't want to call it, I would say a process of decision making to say, let's highlight the points. The points here is what I mean is, first of all, let's highlight over the different party, who needs to be included. And I'm just making this sample matrix here to say, okay, oh, the customers, the sales, the development, product development, process engineering, quality, production, supplier. These are some of the people that I need to include to make a decision on new product or introducing new process or making a change in the operations. Then we will highlight the tasks that we need to go through and what needs to be completed. And we list up all these things that we need to do to come to agreement. And then this task should be lined up in the sequence of not the somewhat importance, but also how long does it take to make a decision? Like, for example, during the new product development phases, right? They will require a long time to test the new product. How long does it take? Process engineering, how long does it take to do that kind of test? And then the quality assurance might jump in here and there to say, okay, that meets our quality requirements. Therefore, you can move on to the next stage or not. And this process becomes, if in the sequence of the process, is very similar to what the standardized work is trying to do. We don't have to have an Nemawashi. So, after highlighting when these things be done, we highlight in arrows to say, okay, who is giving information to who? Or in like number 2 is like a meeting where, okay, when we're having a meeting, okay, these 4 parties have to come to the meeting and come to a full agreement. As a result of that, what will be produced will be summarized by sales and communicate to the customers. And so all this communications and who needs to be included in the meeting or like the checkpoints in this process flow need to be highlighted before the project start, and we follow these steps. The area is that even if I'm going to have meeting, I use the word meetings or I use the word like checkpoints, but one of the important things to think about is that meeting is happening on the Gemba. Because that way we don't waste our time figuring out what the heck is he talking about. So I use the word Gemba, but most obviously Genbutsu is also important too. Like instead of guessing the product, you should have a physical model so that you can touch and feel and lift it up to see if that really matches the needs so that we can communicate more clearly. Good Nemawashi, the person has a good Nemawashi capability, knows good Gemba to take. So they know when before the meeting happens, which Gemba they should take the whole party so that they know that, you know, whatever that needs to be discussed becomes easy for everybody to understand. Like, for example, my mistake, I was having a meeting in the headquarters, right? I was a headquarters guy and I didn't go to the Gemba and was talking about the inventory without bringing the people to the actual warehouse. If I went to the warehouse and see the 3 months of inventory that's covered in dust, and some of them was already like damaged because, you know, it was exposed to the sunlight for a long time, and some of the outside of the product was getting wear because of the sunshine, everybody will agree that that's pure waste. But I did not do that. I just sit in the office, I just showed some numbers and said, okay, this is what we knew. And that's when we start, people will not necessarily fully understand the impact or the magnitude of the problem. And that's where a lot of confusion happens. Like, oh, I disagree kind of opinion happens. If I was able to take them to the Gemba, I think the negotiation could happen much, much more easy. And I didn't have to waste my time. Then we need the body. We need to think about how each and every organization are going to work. For example, standard. So at the end of each steps, what kind of documents that we need to complete, what kind of document that we need to submit so that we can move on to the next stage. And to complete that document, what kind of standard that we need to follow so that we are successful. We are not asking to fill the documents only. It needs to be done in a proper way. For example, quality is going to do a quality assurance test. Then we need to have a standard on how we're going to do that test so that the supplier, not only the supplier, the customer is satisfied, but also the other productions and other process will fully succeed. So we need to think about, okay, not just who's going to be included, but what are the standards and documentation that each stage must complete. And this is something that each functions that support the main flow needs to develop according to their functional expertise. So and this is important, is they need to be clear on what points that they cannot compromise. Like quality guy will say, I cannot compromise on this. I don't care about the other aspects. For example, it might increase the cost, but if you cannot guarantee me this quality, I will not pass this document to the next stage. And that needs to be clear ahead so that when we plan in the cost and everything, we include these different functional factors. And every time there's a deviation, we need to have two things. One is functional support. So if, like I said, we cannot meet the quality standard, then the quality gurus, we need to ask the quality function team to get involved and help us overcome the issues. We trying to meet this standard, but here we introduce a new, technology, and our original test failed. We try to understand the root cause, but we can't. Can you come and help? And also, this needs to be escalated, right? The general manager who's supervising the whole process will have to be notified immediately when there's a deviation, so that the boss, that he or she, understand the situation, understand what's happening in that particular gemba regarding that delay, and understand the magnitude of the problem, and make sure that he has or she has allocated enough resource to overcome the issues. I've seen a lot of different systems, and in terms of like product development or machine purchases, and they will say like 8 stages or 11 stages of the product development, but it's very general in many cases. And also what I don't understand is the escalation is extremely late, right? And that's why by the time the boss finds out that he or she needs to take action, it's already like a major issue that you cannot take an action. If this was done in the early stages, we could have taken a better action earlier, right? And that's what I mean is, like, even when we're doing the test, every day we should have a target for that test. What are we going to accomplish? What are we going to test? If that small incremental goal of every day is not met, escalate it. Then the boss can judge how he or she going to support the process. So by sort of standardizing this process flow and then defining how the process, each function going to support, and highlighting this escalation process, the need for the Nemawashi is drastically reduced. It's not Nemawashi underground negotiation anymore. It's offshore process. It's over the ground on the gemba negotiation. And by doing this, Nemawashi becomes waste. And I'm not saying this process is always perfect, right? I know that this doesn't work from day one. It's okay to have problem. All we gotta do is Kaizen, right? Every time you highlight the problem, don't just fix the problem, but also go back to the standard or go back to this process flow to say, hey, what did I miss, right? Like in my case, I didn't include the sales manager. Okay, when was I supposed to include the sales manager? Did I know that? Or when in the functional support or escalation process, the sales manager was supposed to be included? It was not clear. All I need to do in that particular case was include inside this map that, okay, from now on, next time, I'm going to include the sales manager here and put a dot in that place. So by doing this kind of standardization, we know that we don't have to do so-called the underground negotiation. It's still happening. This kind of negotiation was still happening, but it's formalized in the process. And that way, what's amazing thing about the standardization of the process is it's applicable to different kind of change, right? It might be originally designed for a new product development, But let's say I'm going to change some part of the design of the product. I can basically follow the same flow. I don't have to go and figure out a completely different process and overwhelm the situation. Let's try to follow the same flow. It might not have to do same magnitude of experimentation like the new product, but let's keep the same flow. Let's stick to the standard, and that way we will get the same result. Because the magnitude of experimentation is not that significant, we will be able to reduce the lead time, but let's at least follow the flow. That way, we don't have to do underground Nemawashi, but offshore process will take place. That way, we don't skip a process or we don't violate any of the standards that was necessary to do. So that's my understanding of Nemawashi, right? I hope this was clear that there's a lot of negative nuances in Nemawashi in Japan. I'm very surprised that I see a lot of discussion about Nemawashi as sort of like a positive outside Japan. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why we think Nemawashi is a waste. It does have a dark side, and I wasted a lot of time. A lot of people are wasting time because some of the points and lines are not clear. And that's why it's very important to standardize the process and highlight who, when, what needs to be done. Make sure this flow is clear, and then highlight which gemba that we really need to do this discussion on. To some degree, the soil of where the tree is going to be transplanted, and make sure that the entire organization is aligned and supporting this thing. And always, always, always include Kaizen, right? This kind of complicated flow, you cannot define one thing, move away. We always need to do Kaizen. So that's why I think Toda or some of the Japanese people are saying Nemawashi is a waste, is because we shouldn't keep it as an underground, mysterious activity. If I have a good process flow, it will not be required. It becomes offshore. And that's what I learned about Nemawashi. And I hope this helps to continue our discussion about this Nemawashi. Yeah, that's my end.
Yeah, so let's. I think if you can stop sharing, I can ask you for some clarification if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
So basically, many of us are under the impression and that Nemawashi is good because you're preparing the soil, and like you gave the example, you're preparing not only the soil, the example that you give, you're preparing the roots by trimming the old ones, allowing the new ones to grow. And on the other side, you're creating the soil so that there is, so that the plant survives or in the new soil, etc. However, the point that you brought out to me, or the way I heard about it, that if Nemawashi means that getting behind the screen, understanding underground, as you call it, and understanding between all the stakeholders who are involved in the process, and then bringing it up on the table and looking as if everything is smooth, everybody understood what it is, that's where the problem is. That's the way I understand it. So you are saying that why do you have to do this underground? I don't know how you put it. I mean, how I understood it is that you are talking to each of them, each of the stakeholders, and probably give, take, whatever it is, and say to it that comes on the table, it looks very neat, clean, and ready to go. However, what you are suggesting is, look at Nemawashi. You're not saying Nemawashi as understood as underground activities. If you look at Nemawashi as, I do not know whether I'm right, Nemawashi as top of the table, which is standardized, then
Standardized, yes.
So
yeah, we have a lot of party needs, stakeholders. Who are they? What do we need to agree with them? And then standardize the process of getting that agreement before we start the process. That way, it's not an underground, mysterious, we figuring out as we go process, right? That's the process of waste. We need to figure out what are we going to include, talk about, who needs to be included, and every time we figure out things, we miss things and we make mistakes. So that's why I think it's important to think of this as a process, just like manufacturing process, to say, okay, what are the steps that I need to take? Who needs to be involved to complete this product, standardize it, and do Kaizen? And if that happens, majority of the so-called Nemawashi will happen automatically. And we don't have to have this underground mysterious agreement activities.
Tell me one thing, Obe-san. You made me very curious. Am I to understand that there are two types of Nemawashis? One, which is under the ground negotiation. The other is a standardized Nemawashi. Am I right?
Yeah, so yeah, I never heard the word standardized Nemawashi, but bottom line is, yeah, that might be a way of saying is like, if I have a way of standardizing this whole process, yeah, it's somewhat standardized Nemawashi. It is.
Where I'm
But
coming
if
from, where I'm
I
coming from is the way you have explained to me. What was the purpose of Nemawashi? Was that the plant, when you're transplanting it, has a healthy growth. So the soil is ready, the roots are ready, and it's a healthy growth. I mean, the basic, as you explained it to me. Now, the way I understood what you are saying, at the end of the day, when you are getting the stakeholders on the table and finalizing it, you require to talk to each other and arrive at a common understanding of functional wise, but all related towards the customer. And that sort of exchange of views, exchange of thoughts, etc., as you said, needs to be standardized and documented. But that's also, isn't it, a type of Nemawashi? But it is formal Nemawashi, is it?
Probably formal, yeah. Nemawashi somewhat has a negative underground nuances, right? Behind the surface level, underground level. That's why it had the negative impact, negative nuances. It shouldn't be that kind of figuring out underground issue. We trying to surface it, right? Visualization, process needs to be visual, right? So instead of keeping it underground where we cannot see what kind of roots exist, okay, I have 10 roots. Here's I going to cut those roots so that I will have a successful transplantation, right? I'm not going to cut like 8 and forget to cut 2 and damage the whole tree. So that's something I think they changed is they don't call it Nemawashi anymore. They just call it the standards process.
Can you show me the slide on Nemawashi, the definition of Nemawashi that you showed?
Yeah.
Probably the third slide or the fourth slide. When you introduce the topic. Sorry for that, you made me curious. So I'm doing a formal Nemawashi, not doing behind.
Sorry, my computer is not working properly. God.
Oh, you're still sharing the screen, right?
Yeah, I stopped sharing the screen, but I can go on to the Zoom.
Okay, let's, I mean, I understand the figures that you showed me was you had the a plant over there and the roots over down. Yeah, I think you are correct. Can you come to the definition of Nemawashi, yellow and green, or the plant? Okay. Yeah. So if I go by this definition, and what you have said is that you make the trim the old roots and get the new roots, and simultaneously, if you look at the figure just below that, you are also preparing the soil.
Yes.
Yeah, you're preparing the soil and then you are moving it. Now, what I understand you telling me in your presentation is it is a waste if you do it underground in one-to-one basis, etc. Why don't you standardize it and take it above and get the consensus at that level, and therefore have a process for. I don't know whether I'm right for saying that have a standardized process for Nemawashi. I may be totally wrong. You're better. You are a better person to tell me that.
Standardize the process. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Is it shouldn't be a guesswork of who needs to be included, what to be discussed at what timing. Those kind of things have to be standardized, and it needs to be clear before we start the process. So maybe the the gardeners who transplant the tree, they probably have a standardized process, right? They know when to cut the tree, what to prepare in the soil, how to cut the tree. They know that, and they do it in advance, so that they do it in according to the plan. That's a good Nemawashi, right? Unfortunately, a lot of Nemawashi that happening in the business environment or the government environment is a lot of guesswork, and it could happen is we skip a process, or in many of these Nemawashi meetings, right? Like too many people come to the meeting. I have like 50 people in the meeting, and everybody wondering, okay, what's my responsibility here? I just sat for 1 hour, didn't say a single word. It sounds like this new product is happening, but I myself, as a whatever functional manager, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then later find out that, oh, I have a big responsibility, but nobody told me that responsibility until the very end. And I find out that it's too late for me to do and take any kind of action. So that kind of unfortunate negative side of Nemawashi is happening a lot in the business world or the government world. And that's why we are saying is like, that's not fair. It's highlight those who, what, when, where kind of thing ahead of time. Define the process, just like a successful transportation of the trees that the gardeners are doing. Let's make a plan ahead and do it accordingly. That's a good Nemawashi. But maybe they don't call it as Nemawashi anymore.
What do they call it now?
Just standard process.
Okay, but I think we would like to use a lot of Japanese words, so probably we use a Japanese word. So.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, but that's something I hope that we don't just copy the word. There's a negative nuances in these words too. So what are you trying to do? Let's be clear. And I think the solution is always standardize the process. And we don't want people sort of left in the darkness like myself was when I was doing that kind of work. And yeah, if it's highlighted at the beginning, and if we cannot follow the process, that's fine. We just have the problem solved at that stage. Yeah.
So, so I'm sorry, can you just go down to the matrix that you went, probably 2 slides below. The matrix. Yes. Can you just, sorry for asking you to do this, but can you just put it on the slideshow mode?
Okay. Oh my God.
That's okay. You have to go back. Now I can even take it at this level. Okay. Now what I like about it that if you look at the task and if you look at the x-axis, you have involved the customer in that.
Yeah.
So the customer can no more say that Nemawashi is a Buddha.
If they did not provide the right information, right? And that's another problem, right? Sometimes the customer side is not giving the right information at the right timing. That causes the issue. And then if that's the case, the customer side need to know that they are the one that, causing the turbulences. Customer is, how can I say, it's not God, right? They're going to do whatever they want to do. They have to follow a sequence. And we have to explain to the customer, okay, here's the process that we're going to follow, right? Here's the timing that you need to provide the information. If not, there's a consequence of the quality performance or the lead time of the delivery of the product, right?
So in all this, what you're doing is that you are getting the customer also involved in the total process of above the ground Nemawashi, as you would like to call it. I don't know, that's the way I'm trying to call it. We're going to debate on a LinkedIn, I would say, whether it is below the ground Nemawashi or above the ground Nemawashi.
Yeah, so it's important to highlight these things, right?
Mm,
And the customer should know. It's not like they can call in anytime and say, oh, I want to change my order. No, you can't. You have to go back to the, okay, if the product design change, okay, then we have to go back to this stage and go through the steps again. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee you the quality. And that is a lot of problems are happening around the world is like customers are making random changes and they're not following the steps. Partially that's because of the customer, but it's also important for the supplier side to explain, okay, this is the process that I need to follow to guarantee you the cost and the quality and the delivery of the product. If you violate that, I'm sorry, you won't get the product. And that's right. Totally saying that to the customers too, right? They will say, okay, if you want a specific type of vehicle that's not at the dealership, you have to wait 2 weeks or 1 month or whatever the lead time to make that product. They are clear on that. They're not saying, okay, you can pick whatever configuration of the vehicle and you will get it today. They are not saying that. They are telling me, like, I tried to get a specific type of a vehicle and they told me that you have to wait like 2 weeks because I'm going to put that order and it's going to go through the whole supply chain. They are very clear on this. And a lot of cases, some of these turbulences happening is that customer did not follow the process, or we did not explain to the customer what our process is. And
So-
for example, like the documents, right? It requires the customers to sort of like when they make a request to fill in this documents, a standard documents to show what kind of specifications are required so that the organization will not make assumptions or like guess game on the requirement from the customer. It needs to be documented in a standard way. Customer might not fill out the forms. If that's the case, sales need to do that, and they need to understand the customer requirements and stuff and fill in the internal documents so that they can, they don't confuse the internal side. And those kind of things are very, I would say, strict. That way, the Nemawashi is not underground anymore. It's surface.
So, this is what I wanted to, because I saw the customer there. So that's the reason that I asked that the customer is also involved in that. So that was
very important.
That was what I wanted to see. And what I liked about it is that you may not get it right the first time. You may have a lot of problems on this standard format that you have, but then the minute the problem comes, that's one thing I like about Toyota is that you are looking out for problems so that if the problem surfaces, do Kaizen. If the problem surfaces, do Kaizen. I mean, you're looking for a perfect this thing. There's always a room for perfection. Am I getting it right?
Yeah. So standardized based on what we know right now, the best sequence and steps. Every time that we find out the problem, it doesn't matter what small problem that is, go back to the standard and just improve the standard, right?
Yeah. So now I mean, I just wanted to clarify that. So you can stop sharing, but we can keep talking. We still have enough time for us to talk on some points so that we can summarize it. So you can stop sharing, sir. Yeah. So I'm going away with this feeling that, and just check me out whether I'm right. Okay. We are saying that all this, you have a standard process in place. Who attends, when will it be attended, who are responsible, when do you scale it up? And what I like about what you said is when you're escalating it the time that is for escalating should be as short as possible to the real happening so that it doesn't become an irreversible process, so that the decision is taken and move on is given. So that the direct involvement of the top management, whoever is the level, should be at that moment of time and not after certain things are over. So that has to be also clearly defined, as you're mentioning, that too has to be defined. Now, the basic subject that we are talking about is Nemawashi waste. I think one thing that you made it clear to us is from the customer's point of view, they don't care whether you do Nemawashi or you don't do Nemawashi, whether you do underground, overground, or whatever. They don't care about it. Probably they require only the quality and the delivery. But there again, you said you don't let them go away with that. They should also know that there is a standard process, and if there is a change, then they have to bear up with the delivery and probably the price factor, whatever it is involved. So the customer has to be involved at that some point of time. What I'm leaving the thoughts behind is underground. I don't know. It gives me some sort of a feeling that there are two types of Nemawashi. If Nemawashi means consensus in the sense of understanding each other's problem and working towards the customers and delivering the customers according to what his requirement is, or you're developing something which even the customer has not thought of, but there is a level playing field. Everybody understands what they're doing, but it is not done underground. Is that? It's that.
Yeah, we should not keep that process underground. We should have a formalized process of letting everybody know what's coming ahead. That's what I think this Torres is trying to say, is that change is happening, then lets people know that change is happening. Like, for example, product is coming or new line is coming. They're going to start promoting that in the cafeterias or some corner of the building that change is happening in, like, I don't know how much, what's the timing is, but they will allow people, information will be shared. And they will get sort of like a different process will get a different timing to be introduced to a new process, right? It's not going to be like, okay, from today, we're going to have a new product. Surprise, I have a new product for you today. No, that's not going to happen. They will have like 3 or 1.5 years ahead to say, okay, that information that change is happening. Then they will go through a series of training to make sure that they are prepared for the new product. And then the new product introduction will happen, right? And during this stage of preparation, the processes, for example, production people have some way of saying, hey, this new tool that you introduced me is heavy. It's difficult to work with it. Can you do improvement on this? Because if this heavy tool will be used, I will suffer when the production comes. So, we still have 3 or 6 months ahead. Can I get something better? That's totally fine negotiations, but in a formal process.
So I'm just asking you a straight question so that I clarify, and we'll get a response from wherever we are posting is Nemawashi to be redefined?
We probably should redefine what other people, or this perception, right? That's the problem of just copying the word. I have a negative nuances in based on my experiences and the way we use in Japan. It's very definitely negative because it's underground, behind the scene. It's not clear what's going on. That's the view of Nemawashi. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be open. It should be visual. It should be fair, that by having a lot of standard in that process so that nobody get confused about it.
Okay, so this is what I understand finally is, and I'm just interpreting what you said. Nemawashi, as understood by Japan, has been misunderstood by us because we did not know the real translation of what it really meant in Japan and what were the practices that defined the Nemawashi in Japan. Am I right?
I think, yeah, I think we sort of didn't translate that nuance part. The Japanese people, right? When I know a lot of people use the word Nemawashi and explain to the foreigners that, okay, we need to do Nemawashi. What it means is not undefined process. It means that we need to standardize the process, but I don't think we explained that well. And that way there was a confusion. Like Nemawashi is amazing because, oh, we're going to talk to the different stakeholders, which is important, and get a lot of support from different people. But original intention was that it was something negative. Yes, we do talk to a lot of stakeholders, but in many cases, we don't know who we're supposed to talk to, and we're doing this underground, mysterious figuring out activity. That was Nemawashi. It's not a formal process. That's what we separated. We say, okay, if it's this formal process, this is the process, and on that formal process, we have to always look like we are in full agreement. That was Japanese Mura mentality.
That's the
But
village. That's the village.
That's the village mentality. Is on surface, we always have to look like we are in full agreement.
Therefore, you
And
do Nemawashi.
Therefore, we do Nemawashi. Underground, this dirty aspect.
Now,
That was our nuance of the word Nemawashi. But now what we are saying is, okay, yes, we need to talk to all the stakeholders, but that needs to be clear. What are the things that we need to negotiate? It needs to be clear. When we're going to do this, who's going to be included? It needs to be clear, standardizers on the surface. And if that's the meaning of Nemawashi that we are using outside Japan, I think we are good. But in many cases, I'm not sure. That's why.
So thanks for clarifying that it was the village concept or that was on the west side, right? Which you had the
Yeah.
And so they had to look horizontal this thing. So they had to do Nemawashi, get everybody do a underground thing so that when they come up, everybody is on the same plane.
Yes.
That is the origin of Nemawashi, as I understand it.
Yes.
So what you're saying is have a standard process for all this, right? And document it well and do Kaizen.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Obe-san. And let's take this forward and let's see what other people think about Nemawashi. Thanks for clarifying that. And the cultural base behind the village concept. That I don't know how many of us understand. I did not understand it. And thank you very much for that. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you for the time. And thank you for listening to the confusing concept.
No, I clarified everything. We did not do anything underground. We
tried to surface the differences, right? Yeah, we are okay with this. Yeah.
So thank you very much, and catch you for more episodes on Dr. M's podcast, Obe-san. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you.